Elias by Lev Tolstoy. In the province of Ufa, there lived a Bashkir named Elias. His father died a year after he had procured his son a wife and left him a poor man. At that time, Elias's property consisted only of 7 mares, 2 cows, and 20 sheep. But now that he had become master, he began to better himself. He and his wife worked hard from morning till night, rising earlier and resting later than any of their neighbors, and growing richer each year. For 35 years Elias lived this life of toil and amassed a considerable fortune. That fortune consisted of 200 horses, 150 head of cattle, and 1,200 sheep. He had men to look after the droves of horses and the herds of cattle and sheep, and women to milk the mares and cows and to make kumis, butter, and cheese. Indeed, he had much of everything, and everyone in the countryside envied him his lot. People said, "Elias must be a happy man. He has everything in abundance and has no reason to desire death." The gentry sought his acquaintance and cultivated it when made. Guests came from long distances to visit him, and each and all he received and entertained with food and drink. For everyone who arrived he would have kumis, tea, sherbet, and mutton prepared. No sooner had a guest appeared than a sheep or two would be killed, or if the guests were many, a mare. The children of Elias numbered 2 sons and a daughter, all of whom he duly married off. In the days of his poverty, his sons had worked with him, and themselves tended to the droves and herds. But when they became rich, they began to indulge in dissipation, and one of them in particular to drink to excess. Eventually, the eldest of the two was killed in a brawl, and the other one, who had fallen under the thumb of an upstart wife, became disobedient to his father and was turned out in consequence. Elias turned him out, but at the same time allotted him a house and cattle, so that his own wealth became diminished in proportion. Soon afterwards his sheep became infected with disease, and numbers of them died. Next there came a year of drought, when no hay grew, so that many cattle were starved during the following winter. Then the Kyrgyzes came and stole the best of his horses, and his property became diminished yet further. Lower and lower he sank, and his perseverance also, so that by the time he had reached his 70th year, he had been reduced to selling his sheepskin coats, his carpets, saddles, tilt carts, and eventually his last remaining cattle, and had arrived at absolute penury. Then, when he saw that he had nothing left, he and his wife went to spend their declining years among strangers. All the property now left to him consisted of the clothes on his body, a sheepskin coat, a cap, a pair of breeches and boots, and his wife, Shamshimagi, who was as old as himself. The son whom he had turned out had gone to a distant land, and his daughter was dead, so that there was no one left to help the old people. Yet a former neighbor of theirs named Mohammed Shah felt sorry for them. He was neither rich nor poor, but lived plainly and was a respectable man. Remembering the days when he had partaken of bread and salt in the house of Elias, he felt his heart smite him, and said, "Come and live with me, Elias, and bring the old woman with you. In the summer you can do such work for me in the melon fields as you feel fit for, and in the winter you can tend my cattle, while Shamshimagi can milk the mares and make kumis. I will feed and clothe you both, and if you should need anything else you will merely have to tell me, and I will give it to you." Elias thanked his good neighbor, and went with his old wife to live in the service of Mohammed Shah. At first it grieved them to do so, but in time they got used to it, and settled down to live there and to work as far as their strength permitted. It suited their master to have them in his service, since the old people had been in authority themselves and so knew how to do things. Moreover, they were never lazy, but worked the best they knew. Yet Mohammed Shah used to feel sorry to see people formerly so high in the world now reduced to such a pass. It happened once that some of Muhammad Shah's relations came to visit him, people who lived in a distant spot, and with them a certain mullah. Muhammad Shah bid Elias catch and kill a sheep, which duly slaughtered and skinned, Elias cooked and sent in to dinner. The guests ate of the mutton, drank tea, and passed on to kumis. While they were sitting with their host on carpets and padded cushions as they drank cups of kumis and conversed together, Elias happened to pass the door in the course of his duties. Mohammed Shah saw him and said to one of the guests, "Did you see that old man who passed the door just now?" "Yes," replied the guest. "But what of him?" "Well, this, that his name is Elias, and that once upon a time he was our richest man about here. Perhaps you have heard of him." "Heard of him?" explained the guest. "Yes, certainly I have, but this is the first time I have ever seen him, although his fame used to be widespread." "Well, now the old man has nothing at all, but I keep him on as my servant, and his old wife lives with him and milks the cows." The guest clicked his tongue, shook his head, and evinced much surprise. Then he said, "Verily, fortune is like a wheel turning. It lifts up one man and sets down another. Does the old man grieve about his plight? Who knows? He lives quietly and peaceably and does his work well." "Might I, then, speak to him?" inquired the guest. "I should like to ask him about his former life." "Certainly," replied the host, and called behind the door curtain, "Babai," which means Diedushka in the Bashkir language, "come in and have some kumis and call your wife also." So Elias and his wife entered, and having greeted the guests and their master, the old man said a grace and knelt down by the door, while his wife went behind the curtain where her mistress was sitting and seated herself beside her. Elias was offered a cup of kumis, whereupon he wished the guests and his master good health, bowed to them, drank a little of the kumis, and set the cup down. "Old man," said the guest, "tell me whether it grieves you, now as you look upon us, to remember your former fortunes in your present life of misery." Elias smiled and answered, "If I were to speak to you of our happiness or misery, you might not believe me. You should rather ask my wife. She has both a woman's heart and a woman's tongue, and will tell you the whole truth about the matter." Then the guest called the old woman behind the curtain. "Tell me, old woman, what you think concerning your former happiness and your present misery." And Shams Shemagi answered from behind the curtain, "This is what I think concerning them. I lived with my husband for 50 years, seeking happiness and never finding it. But now, although we live as servants, and this is only the second year since we have left destitute, we have found true happiness and desire no other." Both the guests and their host were surprised at this. The latter, indeed, so much so that he rose to his feet to draw aside the curtain and look at the old woman. There she stood, her hands folded in front of her, and a smile upon her face as she gazed at her old husband, and he smiled back at her in return. Then she went on, "I am but telling you the truth, not jesting. For half a century we sought happiness, and never found it so long as we were rich. Yet now that we have nothing, now that we have come to live among humble folk, we have found such happiness as could never be exceeded." "Wherein, then, does your happiness lie?" asked the guest. "In this, that so long as we were rich, I and my husband never knew an hour's peace in which we could either talk to one another, or think about our souls, or pray to God. We had too many cares for that. If guests were with us, we were fully occupied in thinking how to entertain them, and what to give them so that they would not scorn us. Moreover, when guests had arrived, we had their servants to look to see that they should not compare their board and lodging with that given them elsewhere, and compare it to our disadvantage, while at the same time we had to watch that they did not consume our entire substance, an act of sin on our part. Then again, there would be constant worries lest a wolf should kill one of our foals or calves, and thieves drive off the horses. If we lay down to sleep, we could not do so for thinking that the ewes might overlay their lambs. Half the night we would be up and doing, and then when we retired to rest once more, we would find ourselves beset with fresh anxieties as to how procure fodder for the winter, and so on. Moreover, my husband and I could never agree together. He would say that a thing must be done in this way, and I that it must be done in that, and so we would begin to quarrel, and thus commit another act of sin. The life led us only from worry to worry, from sin to sin, but never to happiness. "But how is it now?" asked the guest. "Now," replied the old woman, "when I and my husband rise in the morning, We always greet each other in love and harmony. We quarrel over nothing and are anxious about nothing. Our only care is how to best serve the Master. We work according to our strength and with a good will, so that the Master shall suffer no loss, but on the contrary acquire gain. Then, when we come in, we find dinner, supper, and kumis ready for us. Whenever it is cold, we have fuel to warm us and sheepskin coats to wear. Moreover, we have time to talk to one another, to think about our souls, and to pray to God. For 50 years we sought happiness, but only now have we found it. The guests burst out laughing, but Elias cried, "Do not laugh, good sirs. This is no jest, but human life. Once I and my wife were gross of heart, and wept because we had lost our riches. But now God has revealed unto us the truth, and we reveal it unto you again, not for our diversion, but for your good." To which the mullah added, "That is a wise saying, and Elias has spoken the truth, a truth which is found set down in Holy Writ." Then the guests ceased to make merry and became thoughtful.